Hello everyone. I always try to start that way, even though we end up just chit-chatting again. But we're gonna wait for a few more people to jump on. But just since I know this is on YouTube and like coming back to it, I'm like, hello.
Oh, is this streaming to YouTube?
Yeah. Oh, so that's another reason that I love StreamYard now, because it live streams to Facebook and YouTube simultaneously.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Because for me, like I always wanted to put it on YouTube because I wanted it to be available to the people who may not use Facebook. So, and yeah, I wanted it to be available for the people who may not use Facebook. And it's so much better at streaming because I can see comments from both come in, so that's pretty nice. Harry is joining us now. I'm gonna let him get set up and then I'll add him in. But the thing I was gonna say too, we're talking about narrow houses and stuff like that. I used to work at IKEA, and that was the best thing is like people trying to get furniture delivered, like always had to know the width of the packages and stuff, or like if they could disassemble it, what was just the width of the actual piece so that they knew they could carry it in their house.
Yeah, so I know for a fact that I can't bring a box spring, queen size box spring does not fit down through my the first flight of steps.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like I don't remember how these people got it up, but I was trying to get it down. I'm like, screw that! I'm just gonna throw it off my deck.
bring a axe to it. Take out all your frustrations.
Exactly.
Harry, can you hear us? Okay, you can hear us. Are you good to go? I'm gonna add you to the stream now. Okay, he's got thumbs up. He's good.
I'm good.
Hello, Laura. We see you. So we've got Tim and Harry today. I know Brad is running a little bit late. And I'm going to go ahead and put us on screen because I know that that's what you guys are all here to see. I like to hide myself. The beginning chit chat.
Is this cold?
What's up?
You're not sure it's cold?
Now I actually know what I look like on screen.
Exactly. So there is what was I going to say too? I saw his Jesse and the Rippers t-shirt and I got distracted.
The Forever Tour.
Forever Tour, 1989. So the topic tonight is plotting versus planning. That's something that we had talked about beforehand. That was what I was going to say. Brad is coming on a little bit later. We'll see who else might pop on throughout here. This is kind of a fun, casual thing. But I want to say thanks everybody for putting up with me last week. But if you are not in the state of Maryland, Maryland was allowed to reopen last weekend. So I was kind of getting in this crazy, like overwhelmed sense because we went from like being open and running a just retail shop to being closed overnight to still trying to find ways to run our business. So we were doing deliveries and we were doing like all these virtual events, and I was getting burnt out from virtual events, and I was trying to figure out how I was going to how and when I was going to be open. And we've decided not to actually, it's me, not to actually open our store, but we do have, I'm calling it counter service. So we have a baby gate at the front door, but you can come up to the counter and I will happily bring you any book that you want to look at right up to the front so you can touch it all you want, and then I can clean it or put it in quarantine for a little bit. So that's kind of how we're handling that. And then, so thanks for letting me skip last week. I was just burnt out and I needed a little break. So like I said, Brad is going to be a little bit late. But the other thing that I wanted to say too is about tomorrow. So our very first, sorry, Harry, our very first, shaking his head. I promise we'll get you in there.
No, you won't.
Our very first author event, well, if you want to drive up, is going to be tomorrow with our friend Tim here. Look, I can even point the right way. There we go. Yay! So Tim will be in we have like a patio area. There we go. Yeah, there we go. Wave. There we go. We have a patio area in front of our store. So if you want to come by and you want to see Mr. Tim here, you can find his new book. We are celebrating the launch of Shadow of Doubt, which is the second. And the Cahill, is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, the Cahill and Claude mystery. Yeah, Cahill.
Cahill.
It depends on where you grew up.
There we go. It's okay. I've been saying Lenape wrong. I keep thinking, I keep saying Lenape, I think. I don't know. I'm saying it wrong.
Yeah, I think I might have mentioned that too. Like the people who narrated the audiobook kept saying it one way, even though I said Lenape multiple times. And they said Lenape.
I'm like centipede. Like I had to mouth out like in very simplistic terms for my narrator. I'm like, no. It is literally like if they were like Lenape, and it's like not like toupee, like centipede, like that emphasis. And then they go, oh, Lenape.
Well, and I'll say with Capricos, I say Capricos. Other people say Caprichos. Like, however you pronounce it, as long as you're reading the book, right? Like,
that's exactly.
I try to keep the positive spin, as Tim and I were talking about earlier. So, hello, Brad. I'm sorry. I realize it's a little high. I'm going to try to change this graphic so that it lowers, so that it's not cutting you guys off. So it's like Brad's riding the wave right there.
I like the graphics, though. That's kind of a nice touch.
Wait, yeah. It gets better. So tonight, this is why I was saying earlier that I love StreamYard versus BeLive. I've not had any like audio issues, streaming issues, anything like that. So tonight our topic is plotting versus planning. And so to give the audience kind of an idea of where we're starting on that. The plot is the course of a story comprising of a series of incidents which gradually unfold, sometimes by unexpected means. And in this case, I'm talking about and in this case, I mean, sorry, Brad. And in this case, we're talking about an author who just sits down and just writes and like lets it plot out, like just lets it come out. And then the other one is planning, and that's somebody who it's a set of intended actions, usually mutually related, through which one expects to achieve a goal. In this case, outlining. So I promise I'll move this down for you guys. But yeah, so I just I wanted to put those fun graphics up just so we could talk about that. Go ahead, Tim, while I rearrange. Laura says those beady eyes. So that is kind of the idea of what we are talking about tonight, whether you plot versus plan. So I'm curious that if anybody watching, if you're an author or if you have a comment on what you kind of do while you write. Oh yeah, that's the other thing. Duh. Let's talk about what we're drinking, because that looks fancy.
It's really cheap scotch that gives me heartburn if I don't like significantly water it down.
Oh,
fun.
What have you got there? What do you have, Brad?
I've got nothing.
Nothing?
No.
Nothing tonight?
No. He brings his charm and wit.
No tuna oil?
I literally just got back from the jog and I got Chinese food on the way again, so.
Always. Nice. That's okay.
Yeah, but the Orient
action figures. Oh, that sounds like fun.
That was the one that I had a couple weeks ago. I actually was going to give a buddy of mine, because I was like, I'm going to bring you a care package. I got a couple of cool beers that I've been trying out, and I feel like you need to dabble in them. And I was going to literally go by his house. He lives down the street from me, and just drop off like a grocery bag of like one or two of them. And I was like, oh, I only have one more action figures. Gasp. Call off the mission. Abort. And I had to go buy another pack of action figure. It's actually really good. It's a citrus pale ale. Again, local, because it's from Reckless. I have to go out to their brewery when the world opens back up, because this is. I'm really weird because I don't drink real beers, so I'm always ciders. If it's a cider, I'm all about it, except for that one that didn't go well. But I'm really weird when it comes to beer. But that, let me tell you, this is high quality stuff right here.
So I have a palimpsest, which is the same drink that I had last week. And right before we went on, I messaged my husband to bring in another one because this one's almost gone. And he sent the wrong thing in. I don't know if I guess I'll try it. It's a ginger lager, ale craft, as always.
Dude, that sounds amazing, actually. A ginger lager.
I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. That's round 2, but I'll let you get started. So let's start with Tim. You were the first one on here. We'll go that way. What's your writing method? Plotting, planning?
Oh man.
Did you see that? Did you see the definitions, by the way, that I put up earlier?
Plotting versus planning. So, no, I missed the definition.
Okay, so plotting is just kind of letting it happen. Like the plot just happens. Like as you're writing, it's just coming out of you. Planning is outlining, very in simple terms.
So, for me, so I'm actually kind of like, as I'm working on book 3, I've definitely planned it a lot. And so Heather's not on here. She's definitely like a plotter. She just kind of like writes, and I'm just like, you're amazing. And I read her work, and I'm like, this is really good. She's like, yeah, and she does it all by hand, and then she writes it. Whereas I'm like, I kind of have to know where I'm going with it, because otherwise I get really stuck really fast. In fact, that's kind of where I'm at right now. I got to the point where I'm like, this is all garbage, and I have to go through a few rounds of planning before I can actually sit down and write. So I have the first 3 chapters written, but then I went back to the planning phase, and I was like, these characters that I'm introducing have to be purposeful in this story, and I need to know where the story is going. But ultimately, the next book, which is Operation Varsity Blues, will definitely have a cabal in it, a little secret political society that kids will inadvertently discover. And the child, their friend Abby Jenkins, who doesn't want to have any part in like going to this prestigious Pennamore college, will somehow betray her parents, who are part of this cabal. But it's like figuring out a way that she does it so that it doesn't seem really obvious to the kids or really obvious to me. Because I feel like for me, there also has to be an element of plotting involved. Like I know kind of like basically what is the plot point that has to occur in each chapter. I know because I typically do really well ending each chapter on some sort of cliffhanger so that a person can sit down and go, I want to keep reading more. In fact, I'm okay with staying up till 2 a.m. and finishing this book because it's just that good. Because I like leaving it off at these weird cliffhangers that make people like at the edge of their seats. They want to know what's going on next. But it's making it believable enough so that it doesn't sound like a flying leap of what is the word I'm thinking of? Like I don't want it to sound like as a mystery that they're just jumping to these wild conclusions, because I need to like tie it together, and which is why it's important, especially I think in a mystery, that at the very least the person writing it needs to know kind of like what is the mystery and how are we putting in those little clues so they don't seem obvious, but when they actually reveal themselves later on, that the reader goes, oh, I'm surprised, but I'm not.
You don't want it to be a suspense of belief, like where you have to like not. Yeah, I know what you mean. By the way, Heather says she has a teething baby, so she can't join us tonight.
I don't know.
Teething baby. She has an infant.
A very angry baby.
Teething baby. A baby that is teeth coming in.
I did not know that was the thing, that she had a teething baby. That's cool.
Yes. So she says she can't join us, which I totally understand. And then the other thing that I wanted to add, I'm going to pull up this thing. You made me think of a quote that I saw earlier today, and it kind of goes along with the theme, but is also thinking about writers now. I know like the number one question I feel like they're all getting asked in interviews is, oh, you're a writer, you must love this quarantine, you must be getting so much writing done. And so Tommy Orange wrote a note to I guess it was from it's on Penguin Random House Stationery, so I'm not really sure. But he said, "Dear students, we will survive this. We have survived ourselves all this time. If you've already lost hope, let's go get it back with writing, with reading, with kindness. Each new day is a chance." And then he said, "Sorry, my handwriting is so bad." But I really liked that. Like, if you've already lost hope, let's go get it back with writing, with reading, with kindness. Each new day is a chance. And I liked that a lot. I thought that was a really good quote. I mean, I'm not writing. I'm not a writer, but I'm still trying every new day. And Brad, I'm sorry you missed it, but I was just going to say, I at the beginning, I said thank you for giving me a break last week because I was really burnt out from like just trying to plan all these virtual events and stay on top of business. And now I've got to open and blah, blah, blah. So what's up?
You've done quite a few this week as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I have 3 like regular events that are happening, and then trying to figure out the difference between doing between doing these virtually. Like if my store is going to be physically open to the public, I can't be on video. You know what I mean? I have to be helping them. So, and it's good that this is a 7 o'clock. I'm starting to open only till 4, which is really nice because I'm getting my evenings back, which is something that I didn't have for a while. So, when I open retail. But Brad, since I already called you out, sorry, Harry, you're going to go last. What plotting versus planning?
I think for me, it's kind of a combination of the two. I mean, I've said in some of the other drinks with authors that I do a lot of planning, and I do. But there are times where you just kind of and you want to just kind of let the story kind of go a little more naturally. So it's kind of a combination of the two for me, but I feel like I've got too many different countries and people and things going on that if I'm not at least pretty planned out, it's not going to go well at all as far as the writing goes. It's going to I'm going to get lost myself. So I feel like I have to do a little planning, especially for the third book because now you're incorporating book 1 and all the stuff that happened there. You have to kind of go back and remember it and say, yeah, I wrote it, but I wrote it a long time ago, so I don't really remember every single detail of what happened. As a matter of fact, I couldn't remember because of the 12 characters, like who's still alive, who's still dead. I kind of did, but I had to kind of go back and figure it out because I don't want to if I'm going to bring another character back in some capacity, if you can't, they're dead. So just that kind of thing. You got 2 books, and they're both very heavy books as far as content, so I feel like I have to do a lot of planning. But then there are times where I do just sit there and just kind of go. And then that's kind of cool too. Sometimes that works out. I think I said in one of the specials that I introduced 2 characters by accident that I ended up liking more than some of the other characters and brought them into the second book. It was Petey the Bird. I mean, Petey the Bird was he just kind of manifested from my imagination when that happened. So.
I'm curious because you are a musician. I know you write a lot of music. Well, I mean, with music, what comes first for you? Do you hear music first, or do you think of lyrics first?
I usually have the acoustic with me, and it kind of comes out almost at the same time. But then when it actually comes to putting the song together, now what I put up on Tuesday afternoon, and we strum in the dining room. But the actual song. That becomes very meticulous versus if you're writing all the different guitar parts or bass part, and that becomes more of a planned event as we're just picking up the acoustic and putting some chords together and writing some lyrics. That's kind of organic and it just happens. It's not like I sit down and be like, okay, I'm going to write a song about this. Sometimes, but usually it's just kind of a stream of consciousness.
That's interesting, just the difference. And I was actually, so one of the other events that I do is with a children's chapter / middle grade author, and she has several series out, and the series are all in their world. So for example, she actually wrote the Frog Princess that they based the Disney movie off of, but she has a whole series where she had to build this world. So she has she always has her characters, something that she had, each one has 2 quirks. So she makes a list of all the characters she's going to have, and there's 2 things that are absolutely going to define them that she makes sure that she reinforces with the reader. I don't want to say customer, but reader, so that she can continue that trait throughout the book, and that's how you kind of identify or connect with the character in your mind. So I thought that was really interesting, and having a general outline. And I know even actually, Brad, you, like you said, you included in the front of your book, you have sorry, I'm at home, so I don't have it in front of me to hold up. Actually, it's upstairs, but but you include like where the characters are from and like a little bit kind of information, so that I like that you put that in the book. So even for readers, we can go back and like, wait, what happened here? kind of thing. Or where are they supposed to be from? So I like that.
Yeah, and then I kind of I realized that I'd done this because I went back. Lisa and I did some brainstorming a couple nights ago about book 3, and I was like, that's why I was talking about. Like, I'm not sure who's alive and who's dead at this point, just because I had forgotten. But I realized on the almost last page of the first book, it was like a little. I must have like done myself a favor because it was like a recap paragraph, and it's like after all that, it was like a recap. It was like, what did I was like? Thank God, I didn't have to go back and read the whole book. So now on book 3, I'm going to make sure that page is there at the very end, just in case there's a 4th book, then I can go back and look at it.
I like that, and I'm going to have to teach my daughter that. And you just so she's writing informational pieces. Okay, she's 8, but she's writing like basically a 4-paragraph thing, and her last paragraph in all of her writing is, "Thank you for reading this. I'm really glad you read it. I hope you pick up more of my writing." And that's like all she writes. And I'm like, no. Like your last paragraph has to be kind of a summary of why you like of all of this. So I'll have to use that as an example. She's like, "Thanks for reading. Hope you like it." No matter what the topic is or the way that it's supposed to be written, it's always just "thanks for reading."
Hey, you know what? Though that's a lot better than what I see in my classroom, which is like, and these are the reasons why I think.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, come, give me something a little bit more to think about. But she's 8, and that's cool.
I know.
Yeah,
I gotta break her of some habits early. Yeah. Well, and my mom is an English teacher, so I'm sure. Like I always had her look over everything, so it was easier. But now I'm looking at some of this stuff, and I'm like, "What's happening?"
What's going on?
All right, Harry. What do you do? Plot versus plan.
I'm going to throw a third option in the ring. Wing it by the seat of your pants.
Pantser.
So I'm going to have to say between the two, I am stronger with plotting. That's not to say that there isn't any element of planning, because like Brad has his character list, and you have that one that has the the 2 quirks and all of that. I actually pulled up just for fun. This is Fubar, the first book, and it also carries on to book 2. And it says book 2, new people I'm going to kill, which is great because that's how you want to introduce people. These are new people I'm going to kill, which unfortunately I will not be killing every single person, but it's almost like my working title, Fubar, Spooky Tales 2 Electric Boogaloo. I'll write stuff in there just for me in the background. But I have, so here's what's really funny. Because I was plotting, you're literally just writing the story as it's people I'm going to kill. Like, unfortunately, so with the characters being like kind of just coming as they are, I didn't even have a name for the main character. I was like, man, I'm going to have to address this at some point. So I literally made an anagram of my own name. Oh. And that's how I got the name Chantry. Because it had a lot of the same. It was Harry Carpenter just rearranged. And one of the options came up. It was like Chantry. And I was like, I can dig that for a last name. I actually went to basic training with a guy named Gentry. So that's not too far off. So I was like, that's not too far-fetched. I like it. Well, let me throw a name. Let me stick a name in the hat. And I went to common American last names, and Jason happened to be one of them. It was like one of the top 5. And I was like, Timothy was another one. It was Timothy, and Jason. Richard was another one, and Mike. And I was like, he's not a Mike. I like Jason. Yeah. And I wrote that down. I said, his name is Jason now. So every other character, I had an idea for who I was doing, but I literally wrote, like, if I didn't personally base it off of a human being that I know, I had to write their quirks. Like one of the civilian contractors that comes in mid-book, he's a leader, Southern, red-bearded special forces type guy. And that was for me to remember that he was from Texas. And, I built upon that. but it was for me to keep in track with that. But that's about as far as I'll go. I won't go too in depth because the story just takes a life of its own. And my worst moments are my crossroads for killing a character. Like, I will come up to this point where I'm just like, and then the group crossed the street, and out of nowhere, a lightning bolts, whatever, you know? And I'm like,
you're killing people with lightning bolts?
And I'm just like, man, somebody's got to get fried. Woo, yeah, it's got to be that guy. And then I will sit there in my kitchen, and I'm just like, it's got to be this guy. That sucks. And I'm like, I'm trying to talk myself out of killing a character, but I'm just like, it makes sense. And this sucks. And I will have this inner conflict for like 10 to 15 minutes of just like, no, there's got to be a way. There's got to be some way, like, oh, and it narrowly misses him. No, he has to be fried. Like, there's no way. This is his time. It's the right point of the story. And that's how I go. Like, I surprise myself where the story goes sometimes. I'm like, oh, man, that guy died. That sucks. Man, didn't see that coming.
And I'm that point too. Like, although I do plan, I like to surprise myself because I do change my plan if like something, because my plan basically sits in like, oh, this is a working document. If something comes, because when I sit down to actually write the narrative, who knows what some of these characters will say or do. I don't know. It might change something that I had planned for chapter 26, and now it's not going to work anymore because this character came out of nowhere and decided that they would, I don't know, reveal that they are really whatever it is they reveal, and now I have to change everything else. And that's cool too, because I like to surprise myself in it, because if I'm surprising myself, then I'm also surprising the reader.
That's what I hope too, because I'm hoping that you're going to read it and go, oh man, I did not see that coming, because I did that. If I have to stop at the crossroads and go, yeah, it's got to be that guy. Yeah, it's going to have to be, in my opinion, like for me to stop and think about it, that means that it must be impactful to the reader. And usually when people finish the book, I'm like, did any deaths like catch you off guard? Were you bummed? The general consensus is one of my first, I guess he's technically the second death in the book, because they kind of happen early on. Like there's a couple of them that are just boom, boom, boom. But it's the second death, and you are positive this man is going the distance. And my buddy Ronnie's like, how you going to do him dirty like that? He's like, that was my dude. So for a character that maybe lasted 3.5 chapters, there was enough of a foundation that you really were into this guy for him to get vaporized. You know, the Mars Attacks moment where you're just like, bless his heart, Jack Black tried, but now he's turned into ash. But you had that much of a connection with a character for all of just a few minutes. And I was like, that means that I feel like I developed characters very well, at least, because these are real people to me that are now caricatured into a book. So it's very easy to write a personable person if I enjoyed the person in real life. The rest of it was just winging it with the story. Where does the gang go next? But I already know who is supposed to be in there. It's just what.
Well, I mean, if you get to a point where you're doing kind of more of a plotting approach and you decide, I'm going to kill this character off, I mean, I'm sure you feel the same thing, and it probably gives you a little bit of hesitation too. Like, well, this is going to be another 1,500, 2,000 words to get from point A to point B. And we're not just going to like get him, shot in the field. I mean, you could be like one of those like Ozark moments where it's like, he's dead, gone. But typically,
spoiler alert.
Well, I didn't say he got shot, but I'm just saying, like, a lot of times, like the deaths in my book are they're pretty gruesome and so they're kind of drawn out. But I didn't always intend on killing that person in that moment, but that can kind of give you a little bit of pause. Like, well, maybe I don't want to kill this person because that's 2,000 words I'm looking at just to get to that point. So maybe they could another chapter. So sometimes it really does fluctuate with your own personal mood.
That's a good point. Earlier you mentioned, Harry mentioned names, and this is somewhat off topic, but just thinking about naming characters, the I just finished watching Fleabag. I don't know if any of you watched that. It's on the river that shall not be named. But they're the only ones who have it. But in that show, none of the characters are actually named. Like the main character and like her sister are actually ever given names. And anytime the point of their name comes up, like at one point, another character starts to introduce her husband, and she forgets his name. And like they dismiss it as part of whatever's happening, and I just thought that was really interesting. That she never actually names any characters. It's just you have the priest, her father, her mother, like her stepmother. Like I was just like, gosh, how do you write a whole book or write a whole, in this case, a show? Like never addressing. You just call them by what their job is or what role they play in her life, and I thought that was really interesting. That could be a fun book to write.
Yeah.
Challenge.
Wow, yeah, screenwriting is so different. In that you don't have to name characters.
Well, you just say mother. You're right, exactly, because they are there. But just thinking about writing, like just call it mother, father, like. But you're right. It becomes their name. So that is very interesting perspectives from everybody. I'm just curious if anybody has any comments. We only had 2 comments early on. We've gotten viewers coming and going. So I just want to make sure that if anybody has any comments or questions for these authors, that they go ahead and leave them in the comment section because I can share them. But yeah, anybody else have anything to add? Now, have you ever maybe tried it another way?
No.
No.
I honestly, I was going to do it for Gravitation because that is going to be a massive undertaking for me. Because I mean, I'm looking at all of my books just because I have them sitting over here. They're all, give or take, about that same thickness, probably tapping out around 200, 250 pages on a good day. Gravitation, I'm in chapter 5, and I'm already like 71 pages in. So I'm picturing this book looking like my bar recipe book at this point. Like it's going to be a serious book. And I thought about like I had to retroactively go back and do my character list because I was like, oh, what's his name? Oh boy, what is the kid? Like my main character has a father who's disabled and elderly. He has 2 children who I very vaguely pegged in age. I told you that one was younger, one was older, but I didn't say which. And I was like, man, I should probably lock this down. Let's see. What was the guy's name that he worked with? And then I had to like actually go back to chapter 1 and scroll through and pull out all of the names. Even if they're a one-off, I might revisit it like 10,000 years down the line. You know, this is where we're coming back to. But
so now you got to start writing.
But I don't feel like I did the planning portion. I don't have a plan. I have in my head an idea for how this story is going to play out. Kind of like point for point, but not so much chapter 5 has to talk about X, Y, and Z. And then chapter 6 will be about, I don't have that. I'm just like, I think that was a good enough amount of stuff for a chapter, and let's call it chapter 5.
You bring up a good point because I feel like planning, my idea of planning doesn't have to be even that detailed. Like you don't have to outline chapter by chapter. I'm thinking overall, like knowing your beginning and knowing your end. I feel like plotting is more not necessarily knowing the ending or not having the details of how you're going to get to the ending versus planning, at least having some way to reach point A and point B.
Well,
so
I don't think
planning needs to be that detailed.
Yeah. I think at minimum you have to know like your major plot points, the major points in your story where things change. Like if you don't know that, I mean certainly you can discover it as you go along, but like beginning, middle, and end that's the bare minimum that I require of students when they write a scene or they plan out a series or whatever. Beginning, middle, just give me beginning, middle, and end. Somewhere in there has to be some sort of conflict or obstacle that the character has to overcome. Because I mean, I've read a lot of stories that are contemporary that I'm just like, where I've read chapters where I'm just like, I don't know what's going on. What was the point of this chapter? Like it didn't like really add to the plot of the story. It was just kind of this weird.
It's that Hollywood deleted scene that should have remained off the movie.
Right. I mean, I didn't hate the scene. It's just it didn't necessarily.
Yeah.
It didn't really necessarily support what the, like when we think about a book as a product, and the product says whatever it says about the blurb is what you're selling. But if you're reading a book and you're going, well, the book is about this, without naming any names, I'm reading a book right now. It's a really cool premise. It's this like 1850s Scottish female who is an undertaker, which is really unheard of in that time period of a woman owning a business. And she solves mysteries, and she's like a seance psychic. I'm like, this is a really cool premise. But then there's all these weird filler chapters where I'm like, this has nothing to do with the story. Like, give me like her solving the mysteries. That's what I want to read. I don't want to read about her being and I'm all for like women being all independent and whatnot. That's fine. Women being business owners, that's fine. But if what you told me is this story is about this woman who owns a business, who owns an undertaker business, and she solves mysteries, that's what I expect to read.
But I feel like, but I mean, I feel like it depends on. I mean, the only reason I'm going to argue. My argument for that sometimes would be that if you are planning a series and you need that character development. So it might seem pointless in the first book, but you might need to have that like extra part again that seems pointless in the first book, but that could come into play later. So again, like you're saying that she had these struggles like because she was a woman in that time. And it's funny because you made me think of kind of subtopic, but the I'm reading Sleeping Beauties by Stephen King and Owen King, and that thing is like, oh my god, it's so, his books are so long, and I don't know that I've ever felt like anything in there is truly pointless, but I've never gone back and been like, why was this even in there? It's just, I just read and I pick out certain things, and I'm sure that there's a reason they're in there, but there's plenty of times where I'm sure there's scenes that aren't needed in Stephen King books.
It feels like that's the director's cut that you get every time. You just get the extra scenes. Like, it was a good scene. I mean, I really enjoyed that dialogue, but I mean, it didn't further the story whatsoever. And like, I usually look at books as a movie because most people, when they're reading the books, the movie plays in their brain and they're watching it play out. So when you get to this like heavy dialogue where they're talking about coffee creamer or something, I'm just throwing a weird idea out there. And it's like, and it has nothing to do with like maybe a later plot point where they come upon a Keurig or something. And they're like, of course they'd have hazelnut creamer. And it's like, oh man, this guy really hates creamer. That whole conversation was just a one-off. Coffee creamers never revisited. Hell, the guy never drinks another cup of coffee the entire book. But you're just like, huh? So it's like I see it like that. It's that deleted scene that sometimes fills in a book, and you're like, you could just.
Well, again, I feel like that's all. A lot of times, those are often meant for like. Even if we as a reader don't always understand it, they're meant to be character development. And we're talking about, like, again, using the creamer analogy, like it's meant to show that this person likes things that are a little more complicated. They're not just here, pour it in a cup and go. They think about it a little bit more, or that they like sweet things, like all these like little things that we may not always necessarily see how they come into play or understand that. I'm sure there's like subtle reasons for a lot of that stuff. My favorite thing is when I feel like there's a scene that is pointless, and then all of a sudden it like clicks in the fact that, like I said, it's like, oh, they were pointing out that this person has a sweet tooth or something stupid like that, but it's still actually a really good, like, subtle nod to something.
Which is interesting because Laura said that you as writers read other stories with a critical mind right from the beginning, or do you read for enjoyment?
Yeah, I'll put that on the screen there.
That's
Look at
a
Brad,
really
did
good
you have
question.
something to add?
I was just gonna say, I'm not sure how far along Harry is in my book, but there's 4 chapters that they're intended to be character development. But I'm sure, like, if you got to like even the first dream, there's 4 dreams. You're probably thinking, what the hell does this have to do with anything? Well, he's got 40 chapters to go, and then I'll figure it out. But yes,
Yeah.
it can seem like that.
But yours ties together at some point. You'll get this filler stuff. You're just like, the hell am I reading? Come on, Brad, you're killing me here. Like, what does this have to do with anything? And then like 7 chapters later, you're like, oh, dude. So that's why the guy did the thing with that guy and the thing. You know,
Right,
like you
that's
start
great.
like it just comes together. But when you don't have those moments,
Right.
that's when you're just like, okay. Like, it's not even like a weird pick, like, you know, to even, you know, I'll call out my own book as well. The character Martinez, who I really loved writing, by the way, I could write the character Martinez all day because I could give him, because I made him kind of like this kind of macho-ish Spanish fellow that had like arm sleeve tattoos, head was shaved bald, you know, your typical, like, I call it the Hispanic soldier. And he probably had a lowrider back home. Yeah, like all the cliche stuff that I could feed into him. It was fun to do that. But then I gave him this little quirk of he read like weird, like grocery store, like checkout romance novels. But why would I do that? I actually tie that together, like, I don't know, chapter 14, 15, something deeper into the nether regions of the book, where you're just like, it then becomes such a plot point that you're just like, dude. So I don't like when people just write a weird little thing that makes no sense. Like, if you're trying to develop a quirk or like it supports that character's quirkiness, that's fine. But anything outside of that, you're just writing like nonsensical phrases that mean nothing to me getting to the end or the end, ... question mark, whatever it may be in whatever case. One-off books or trilogies or whatever the name for 4 books is.
Series.
Yeah, there you go. Series. Whenever you're doing that, like, doesn't matter if it's a one-off or a series of books. I feel like it's a little bit more lenient with a series because that may be revisited in book 3, and you'd be like, ha, the coffee creamer. It comes back full circle.
Now
But if
that
it's a one-off book and you read the end and you're like, why did we have this like 4-page argument about coffee creamer? But he's not an argumentative person. He's generally a shy person that doesn't confront anyone. What was the point? Like, it would be just so out there. I get critical when things like that take place, to answer Laura's question, when I see something that's just so out of character and there's no rhyme or reason for it later. They didn't have a mental break or a slip. It was just like maybe the writer forgot who they were writing. And they were just like, oh, man, I wrote this for Bob, and this was supposed to be for Bill. Too far gone now. And then they just kept, I don't know if that's the mindset, but like I went on with that Jonathan Mabry writer, and thick books, Stephen King thick. Like, you're just reading and you're like, why? But everything seems like it belongs in the book.
And this is bringing it all back to the whole thing is like, this is why in my mind that not having a plan leads you to scenes like that, to having pointless scenes because you just felt like writing that day because you were ticked off because there was no creamer left. So you started writing about it and you put yourself in like stupid things like that. Like, I just imagine that that's part of the development. And that's why I'm like, I need a plan so that I don't go crazy, like just writing random scenes.
I think, speaking of that, like, if you're doing it that way, then at the very least, when you do introduce something like new or something that seems completely out of character, you at the very least need to make note of it and say, I did this thing with the coffee creamer.
Yeah, exactly.
Somehow this has to show up later on. Maybe it shows that the character is super indecisive, or maybe it shows that the character is really decisive, and that's really important for that character in solving, in discovering, and encountering whatever it is that they encounter later on.
What about a more grounded, real one? Like, okay, let's look at American Psycho, book or Christian Bale running naked with a chainsaw movie. Either or. Look at a scene like what would look like it's very pointless. Like you pull this, extract it from the movie, and you're like, the business card scene.
That's a good example.
Like, it's just like the raised print, the slightly eggshell color. Like, okay, now it's become a business card joke. Whenever I get my business cards made, we always make that joke. Like now they have raised print and all of that. But with that scene out of context, like not knowing who Christian Bale's character was, you just get that little snippet. You're just like, all right, well, that's a little weird. But the grand scheme of things, it shows that little things bother him. He's envious of other people. He's very, like, you don't get that just from that scene until you see that he's upset about the rest of the job, the overall picture, and then he starts butchering people to Huey Lewis and the News. But you don't get that without the full picture. But I feel like if you write a scene like that, that's a very standalone one-off scene where you're like, what? But then you get the other aspects of the character, and you're like, oh, this dude's totally just bonkers. That's all it is. Like, he's got plastic down on his furniture. He knew what he was doing. You get a lot of the videotapes that he has to return to Blockbuster or something like that. Like, it's such a random thing. I have to return some videotapes, but it's just these character quirks that make his character, and it doesn't feel out of place. So while these things are very out of place, weird things, it really makes his character. When it's the opposite, where you just throw in like an argument about coffee creamer, but your character isn't argumentative, doesn't drink coffee, and doesn't talk to people, like, then you're just like, well, why did we just have this like 6-page discussion about, which is better, Coffee Mate or whatever the other brands are?
International Delight.
So the answer is yes.
We made a whole career of it.
We read critically. So short answer, yes, we read critically and for enjoyment.
Yeah. Brad, what did you say?
I was saying that Quentin Tarantino's made a whole career of like pointless dialogue and everything, but it works because it's all character development. And there's no reason, like in the beginning of Reservoir Dogs, to start talking about Madonna. But Steve Buscemi's character, like it's part of the development. So,
but he doesn't tip.
He doesn't
tip.
I can't.
Because he tip.
Oh, he doesn't tip.
He doesn't tip.
He doesn't tip.
But it's weird that when's the last time you watched Reservoir Dogs?
Not recently enough, to be honest.
It's been a while. Same with me. But you remember these little quirks. And that right there is, it might be nonsensical to talk about Madonna or that you don't tip waitresses or whatever. But these were things that we both remembered. Like, that was like very vivid. Like, oh, what about not tipping waitresses? And it's a weird. So I feel like if it's done right, it sticks. If it's just this nonsensical, like, goofy thing. Like, unfortunately, the sparkling vampires stuck with Twilight. Like, the definition and maybe better wording, a thesaurus could have been used. I don't know what would have saved that. But it even translated to the first movie visually. Like, he is glistening like he just fell out of a bucket of glitter. And I'm just like, what did they do? No.
So it's so funny that you bring that up, because I was going to bring up, I am listening to the audiobook for a prequel of Hunger Games. So it just came out. It's called The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Yeah. And I read Hunger Games. I'm not like into things like that necessarily, but I love pop culture. So I like to read those because I want to understand the pop culture. Yes, exactly. I can't whistle. I would whistle, but I don't want to whistle into the mic. But the it's blowing my mind because, again, I wasn't very into them, and I didn't really necessarily remember that much about any of the characters. This book is all about President Snow, and I am finding that she definitely went back and read her own books, because there are so many things that I'm like, oh my God, I totally remember that. And I never would have thought, like, if she didn't bring it back up in this book, I never would have remembered it about the characters. Yeah. So it's really interesting, these like quirks that are all of a sudden coming out that you're like, oh my God, this explains so much. And I'm not even a 10th into the book, and I'm just like, so much is being explained already.
Do do you think she really went back and read intently on all of her books, or are these characters like, okay, so for comparison, Fubar to me, all of the main characters that I developed are real people. I know their quirks. I can stop. I mean, half these people I haven't seen in over a decade, but I remember their quirks and their little ticks. So do you think that she based like Katniss and friends on like people that she knows, so it wasn't so hard to really go back into like, well, this person, whistles 3 times and stomps their feet and clicks and winks every time that they say a word. Maybe that's what the neighbor that she based the character on does.
I really, really feel like she actually, the way that it's written is that she was writing the first books and wrote down, like, I just imagine like massive notebooks of character development for herself. She planned all of this out for herself. And then was like, and whatever she didn't include in those books, I feel like this book is like, I feel like I need to explain all these things in all of the other books, because like she's got like a binder all about like a whole dossier of this person and things that she didn't explain. And now I feel like she's going back and being like, I feel like I need to explain this character to you better. Because it's all about President Snow and like why he is the way he is, and like, his whole thing. Well, he's not the president in this one, but so, like, again, already so much is explained about why he is the way he is in those previous books. But I just imagined her having a whole thing and her being like, yeah, I've got enough material to write a whole nother book and explain why I did what I did. I mean, you don't need it because he's a jerk. Like, he's a horrible person. Why is definitely also very interesting.
If we're picking out these like big blockbuster books, what about, okay, so equally as popular, we talked about The Sparkling Vampires. Do you think it was the same thing to write the Edward edition, or do you think she literally was going page for page? Instead of it being like, this mysterious stranger showed up and swooped me off my feet before I was hit by a car, she just changed it to, I swooped in as a mysterious stranger and swooped this woman off of her feet. Like, do you think it was like a verbatim like switch, or do you think she read her books and said, if Edward was in this position,
I think you remember too much about Twilight.
I literally remember the guy that almost ran over Bella, because I had a team guy that almost ran over Bella's shirt that got me in trouble so much. But that's all I remember. I don't remember anything. I think I've seen the
fair enough.
Movie 4, but like, do you think that she like reread her books, or developed a new persona to write from? Instead of it being Bella, she wrote it as Edward, or did she just like page for page? She's like, page 3. Okay, well, Bella apparently is glancing over at him in the cafeteria. Bella glances over at me in the cafeteria. Like, is it like I never read the book.
We'll see in August when the next book comes out.
I'm just curious, like, what's the process for something like that to tell it from a new person? Like, President Snow is a different perspective, but it's also a new story. It's a prequel. Yes. It's a different story. It's kind of like when The Walking Dead did the Road to the Governor or I Am Negan, where you got this backstory prequel. You know the guy. You know the crazy Yahoo that he becomes. But it's fun to kind of explore all of these other paths. That's the President Snow tactic. You get this whole like backstory of how the bad guy became the bad guy. But writing a character that's been equally parallel since chapter 1, essentially. I don't know when Edward pops in, but chapter 1 or 2, whatever, he sparkles his way in and saves her from the car accident. How do you write just a full-blown 180? Like, I just have to imagine that might be an easier process, because you just tell the same thing that happened. You're not coming up with anything creative. It's easier but harder.
You gave me an idea for next week. Go ahead, sorry.
I'm sorry. Are you talking about rewriting a story that you've already written from a completely different
Twilight. So
Twilight
1.5. Yeah, so Twilight
book.
So it's 4 books. Another one is coming out in August called Midnight Sun, which is written from Edward's perspective. So it's the same story, but it's from his perspective. So you're literally she's rewriting the whole story, but from a different character's perspective. So I'm very curious to see. But apparently, there's been a lot of fans that have already written that. So a lot of people are going to be curious how much fan influence there is there.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just curious. I mean, I will read it because I read the first ones because, again, pop culture, and I need to understand the jokes. But and because I'm watching Parks and Rec, and there's like tons of jokes about Twilight in that. But
or did she do it because of the fanfic that also got popular? Well, that and money. But do you think that because of the fanfic that came out with Mr. Grey and friends?
Oh, yeah. That's true
because
too.
they did the Grey edition where he's like, I was standing looking out of a window. This woman appeared behind me in an elevator. Like it worked.
That's a good point, actually.
Do you think that she went back and did that because she's like, well, my fan fiction was successful with it?
That's a really good point. So for those of you who don't know, 50 Shades is actually Twilight. You do. 50 Shades is Twilight fan fiction. So that started as Twilight fan fiction, right? And it doesn't have vampires or anything, but it's still pretty crazy, right? So then that author of 50 Shades actually came out with a fourth book that was all the opposite character's perspective. So now I think the Twilight author, that's a really good point, that the Twilight author is like, sure, if my fan fiction, if somebody else is going to write a book from both characters' perspectives, maybe I'll try that myself. So, I mean, it's also 10 years, so it was due for something to come back out. Laura says, sounds like a book I would read. I'm curious what she means in general, like
the
Twilight, Midnight Sun?
President Snow or Midnight Sun,
exactly.
Or 50 Shades of Grey from Mr. Grey's perspective.
All of the excellent. So you gave me a good topic for next week, and I'm going to introduce it now and see what you guys think. Villains, writing villains.
Yeah.
Brad, does your book have villains per se?
Oh yeah.
Or is it just conflict?
No, it's got a major villain.
Okay, all right.
There's a major protagonist and major antagonist in that book.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, and it's clarified. It was the Hunger Games prequel.
Okay, it is out now. It is called The Ballad of Songbirds. Pre-ordered it on my website. Not pre-order. I order it on my website. I have patches. I have special patches. It's really good. It's read by Prince Hans for those Frozen fans. If you want to do audio, it's a really good audiobook. But yeah, I think that I would actually appreciate that more often if authors could do that. I imagine that's got to be a tough challenge to write a book from a different character's perspective.
What about the main character being the villain? Because that's coming out in a couple of months.
There you go.
Yeah.
So I write it for you. It's okay.
It's very would you just say American Psycho?
I finally watched Joker, and if I had
I want to see that.
Okay, so it was on like Comcast or one of the streaming thingies, and I was just like, we're doing this thing. By the way, hell of a ride. Has hardly anything to do with the Joker that you know, but if you're a huge comic book fan and even watched the cartoons back in the day, they peppered in a lot of different storylines to kind of make one, cinematic storyline. It's fine. But for like, when I wrote this, I was writing it under the pretenses where I want you to feel sorry and then be like, dude. And then you're like, man, that guy got a raw deal. Oh, come on, man. So that's the Joker until there's this tipping point where you're just like, all right, now you're okay. No, I can't follow you with that. No, come on. What do you like? That's where it just becomes this like steamroller downhill of just thing after thing where you can't defend like, well, he just had a raw deal. If that guy might have been nicer to him, he wouldn't have showed him how to make a pencil disappear. Which is not a spoiler because that's from The Dark Knight. Get over it. But I kind of did that, which I didn't realize. I didn't watch Joker, so I did that. I'm making
notes. I'm making notes for our villain discussion because you've got me. I've got a lot of thoughts on that already.
Ooh. Good thoughts. But yeah, by the way, Joker, highly recommend it. It is it's a movie. It does have Bruce Wayne in it. It does have Alfred. It does have Thomas Wayne. And that's it. By name only. There's no Batman.
So it's a Joker origin story.
It's weird because I've always had a problem, and now it's a comic book discussion. I've always had an issue with the Joker's origin story, having him at like 40-ish years old, and Batman's like 8. I'm like, Batman, dude, are you telling me that you are in the prime of your life at 20-something years old, getting your rear end handed to you by a guy that pushing 70, 80? Are you kidding me? So that's the issue that I have with this movie. If Bruce Wayne is a little dude and Joker is Joaquin Phoenix's, I'm going to say his real life age is what, like 50-something? We'll say like 40 to 50-something. And by the time Batman grows up to have the Joker as a villain, Batman's in his mid-20s, early 30s when he first Batmans, depending on which storyline. That puts Joker at like old. So that's another thing that I have an issue with writing in general. If you're writing this type of piece, how it lines up with, I understand you want to make Batman and make this little nod, fan service thing, but I'm like, dude, Batman would wipe the floor with him all day.
Yeah, that's an interesting take on it, because watching the Batman syndicates, the what's his name, with the TV series. Who was he? Anyway, I never pictured Batman as that much younger than
with Gotham? Are you talking about Gotham?
No. Adam West.
Different one.
Adam West. Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
I never pictured them as. I'd have to say that my favorite Joker would be the one depicted in the Adam West series.
Cesar Romero Joker. He seems like he's maybe a couple years older than Batman, maybe by a decade, but it's not unfeasible for them to be like having this confliction. But when he's already in his 40s and Batman's like 6, like Gotham did that. It just was weird to me.
You just made me think of something totally different, which is also graphic novel versions of books. And just thinking about, for some reason, you totally made me think that I could see Brad's book completely easily as a graphic novel series.
Dude.
Like
and a TV show.
I feel like there's enough written that deep.
Somebody greenlight Brad's book.
Tim's too. Like I imagine. I mean, obviously his is for younger readers. They're just very different. The visual styles of each of them would be very different in my mind. Brad's definitely has a very Walking Dead, like black and red ink style, and
like a full noir type of style, very dramatic, bold, contrasting colors, if anything.
Right.
Not very happy-go-lucky and poppy colors.
Not that Tim's would either, but Tim's would definitely be less harsh lines. Like graphic novels with harsh lines are hard. So Laura, while we wrap this up, because we're at an hour, and we will talk about villains next week, and we'll get more into that as long as you guys are cool with that. I just thought,
absolutely.
I want to know about your villain development. So Laura asked if Tim will have some signed books at the store. So yes, he's going to sign everything. He doesn't know this yet. I'm going to tell him to sign everything that he's got in the store. Brad, you've already signed everything, and Harry, you've already signed everything that I have.
Yeah, I got a couple more books ordered for you. I'm going to send over your way.
Okay, excellent. So I have signed copies of all of these authors' books. I think they're all on my website. If not, I will get there tomorrow, I promise. I'm constantly updating things and adding this. Yes, the llama's back.
Yay.
So while we were here, do we have any last Oh, you know what? Something that you made me think of, actually, I think Timothy was the one who... Tim. Sorry, you write Timothy on there. I don't know what you prefer. Right. When I think of the name Timothy, I always think of Timothy Mouse from Dumbo, like the little mouse. His name is Timothy Mouse. So
funny story with that.
Sorry.
I'll share this with y'all. When I was probably like 6, 7, I actually... my parents did introduce me to Dumbo, yes. And there was a period of time from kindergarten to like 2nd grade where I signed all of my papers as Timmy the Mouse.
Yes.
That was me.
That's better than being Harry and the Hendersons.
That makes me feel better about always like just associating that name together.
Well, my last name's Cox. You can only imagine what I went through.
You poor man.
Oh, poor Brad. My main name is Graham, like the cracker. That's what my mom always told people. So Graham, yeah, like graham crackers. So she'd be like, "It's Graham, like the cracker," and I'm like, people don't know how to spell it, regardless. But the talking about plotting versus planning, and we were talking about authors developing all that, and talking about rewriting. And I'm sorry if I already brought this up, but I don't remember it. Talking about writing as you're going, so that not that sounds weird, but like writing your like sub notes as you develop the characters, so you're like backwards outlining almost, so that you can remember for the future. I just thought I'm like just a random
that's
idea.
almost what I do. Yeah,
one of the points that I wanted to throw in there was that I think when you get a lot of that unnecessary content, and it's when you're more concerned about word count than you are actually writing your story. It's like you may set yourself a certain goal, like I'm going to write 1,000 words today, and then you might go off on a tangent about coffee creamers that really was unnecessary. And there's those contests they have every month in November. There's all kinds of writing contests, and I think when people get more locked in with that, you're going to start getting some garbage.
Yeah, that's
a really good point.
I know I've shown Liz the writing group that I'm part of on the Book of Face, and there are people in there that are like, "How many words does my novel have to be? It's science fiction, it's horror, it's a romance." It's like, dude, anywhere between when you finish and when you don't. When you're done and you write the end, that's how many words it needs.
Right.
Done.
That's a very David Mamet approach. Just like, I wanted to write this story that was compelling, and it ended up being whatever it was.
Yeah. I want to film a movie. It needs to be 2 hours long.
Let's talk about
It's kind of goofy. So to piggyback off of Brad's, it's not about word count. It's not about quantity. I've seen some books that have been like 70 pages of book, and they've been phenomenal. Bird Box is short. Not to say that it's phenomenal, but it got a Netflix series. Where's my Netflix special? So they're doing something right. It's a short book. Gravitation by Stephen King was a great short book, in contrast to like The Stand, which is like 5 of my bar book.
I was just going to say The Body. So The Body actually was just released separately. The Body became Stand By Me, which is just this. Yeah, it's a super short. A lot of his short stories are now becoming like movies. And his crappy, his giant good books are becoming crappy movies. So,
but yeah,
Under the Dome became a terrible series.
Hey, whoa. 1, 2, and 3 seasons were amazing. Or no, 1 and 2 were great. And then you got into the third season, and that didn't happen. 1 and 2 were solid and semi-respectable. I will not discuss the last season because that was an abomination, and it needed to be locked in that cellar that it came from, never to see daylight. But
that gets us into like Peter Jackson spending an hour of time in the cave with Gollum and Bilbo Baggins. I'm like, I really need to spend an hour of time in that. That was like, what was that? A chapter in the book, The Hobbit. I mean, it was great when I read it.
They also knew. So if you look at it from a filmmaking perspective, in terms of popularity, who was the dude that everybody loved in Lord of the Rings? No, the Hobbitses. No, he's the Precious's. They liked Gollum, Schmeagol, whatever he wants to call himself at the time. They liked that character. So unfortunately, Hollywood will shove down your throat the character that you know and love until you're just like, this is the stupidest movie ever. I've been overly Gollumed, and we hate sits. We don't want sits. You know, that's the problem with Hollywood, where, like you said, you remember it maybe being a chapter, 2 at best. Somebody decided to make an entire full-length movie of the conversation within the cave. That's where that problem becomes. That's the Hollywood effect. Taking so I'm going to put this out there. I'm watching Disney and I'm watching Cars. Mater had a great secondary role, just peppered in enough. But everybody loved Mater. Get her done. So they threw Mater at me every second. It became Mater as the main character for Cars 2. For Cars 3, I'm hoping, because we're watching that tonight, it goes back to being about Lightning McQueen and, you know, the regular idea. But I'm not that hopeful. But as soon as Hollywood finds out that something is popular, they will jam it down your throat in the film for every subsequent movie. If something worked once, they're going to go, well, if it worked once, what if we do it for every scene?
Yeah.
And
So the
spin-offs like
Indiana Jones
bananas.
effect.
What? Say that again, Brad?
I said it's like the Indiana Jones effect. Like some of these movies are the Rocky effect. It's like, well, that worked. We'll just do it again. And then you start watching these movies and start seeing.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
I liked all of the Indiana Jones.
you know what I'm saying, Marcel?
Oh, that didn't count.
Well, I know what he's going to say here.
I would call it the Land Before Time effect. The first one was great. The subsequent like 8 were horrible. They made way too many of them.
Wait,
Land Before Time.
Oh, yeah.
Some ridiculous amount. Like full length movies, not even like a spin-off. I mean, it also had, I think, a spin-off show.
Oh, yeah.
It had all this, but they made full length movies, like some ridiculous amount. And
the characters that you clicked with, like if you liked, what was it, Ducky and
yeah.
Terry, like those were your dudes. Guess who gets to star in the future movies? And they're just going to throw these characters down your throat, and they're going to take Littlefoot out. Yes, I know a lot about Land Before Time. they're gonna pull Littlefoot back and throw these characters that you know and love into the foreground so you can get what you love until the point that you're just sick of them. So that's another thing too, like in writing. If, like, for example, I said I loved Martinez, I loved writing him. But if I went into book 2 and I was just like, Martinez comes out, balls first, ready to rock and roll, and that's my whole book, like, what happened, dude? Like, what happened to the characters and all? Like, it was a Martinez show. Like, that's what Hollywood ends up doing. So I blame that as the Hollywood effect. That's why you got Gollum in a cave for over an hour talking about nothing. You know, it was a Seinfeld episode with Gollum.
All right. Anyone else have anything to add on plotting versus planning before we wrap it up?
I got
no. I actually have to wrap it up. I gotta get going.
Okay. He's got poker to play. Poker to play. Good luck. Did you win anything last time?
No, I made it to the last table. I came in 5th place. There was a lot of us, so I was still happy with the performance. But this guy actually he knocked out 3 of us with a straight flush.
Oh.
So we all had flushes, but he had a straight flush. I'm like, if I'm going to lose anyway, then that's the way to do it. So
yeah.
Sucks.
All right. Well, good luck.
Thank you.
And we will see everyone next week, 7 o'clock. We're talking about villains and villain development.
Ooh,
Bye.
that will be an interesting.